Hi, y'all, and welcome to the second session of the HBCU-DAP. I'm Tony,
I'm Sierra again.
and today we'll be talking about applying to graduate school. All right. So I just want to go over the disclosure statement one more time. Basically, this participating in this webinar does not guarantee admission or interviews at any graduate program or institution, as well as the thoughts that we share and the opinions that we share during this webinar and others reflect our own thoughts and not the opinion of any university or institution. Okay. So today, we actually introduced the application checklist last week, which basically goes down the list of the things that you need to do in order to have a complete application. So today, however, we're going to focus on three things. So basically selecting a program of interest, the statement of purpose and personal statement, research statement, as well as the CV. Okay. These are all things that you need to kind of start thinking about in order to put together your application for graduate school.
So we are going to do a quick activity. So one of the first things you want to do, you might have some programs selected and that's fine, but you should also consider things that you want and need as a person, and then what your research interests are to help you kind of shape the program, the institutions you actually apply for. Yep. So we're going to give you about 3 minutes. Just think about the type of things that you want and need as a person. Wants and needs can be in different columns depending on who you are, and then outline what your research interests are. Okay, so now that you guys have had time to think about things that you want and need and your research interests, we just want to give you a couple ideas that we kind of considered when we applied or selected our programs. Yep. So I know for me, location was important, but it wasn't a need for me. It was more of a want, so I was kind of more flexible with it. Mm-hmm. You can also think about curriculum requirements, like how many classes you have to take or how many years of classes. That's something that you want or need. Transportation, if they have good public transportation, if you don't have a car, do you need a car? How are you going to get there?
One of the things for me was actually with transportation was if it was close to an airport and if it was easy for me to get home. So I didn't really care about location,
that's a good point.
But if I could get home pretty quickly or easily, then I need to know that was something I can do at least with like a day.
Yeah, that's good. So for us, like we're 45 minutes technically from the closest airport. Yeah. I currently live 5 minutes closer to the airport, but like thanks that I have a car, so living 45 minutes is not a big deal. But if you don't have transportation, it might be something that comes up. Things that you need. So that can include diversity, culture needs. So things like, can I get my hair done in this city? Can I get a haircut? The beauty supply store, food, things like that. Things that are important to you that you need for cultural self-care, I guess. Yeah. And then benefits. And we'll talk a little bit about this in session 3, but like when we say benefits, I mean like funding package. And then lastly, what are your research interests? So think about the area of study you want to go into. It doesn't have to be specific, but if you know you want to work on this gene and this model, you can consider that, but I would definitely be open when it comes time to applying because you might limit yourself until what institutions actually bring you for an interview.
Yeah, so it's almost like have like your ultimate interest, but also have maybe like a list of backup things that you're also interested in, could study, but you know.
Yeah, like I want to work in this gene and this model. However, I also would be interested in doing some translational work and human and mouse work, something like that.
So you don't really have to know what it is that you want to study in applying to graduate school.
Absolutely. And then career goals. So does the curriculum, the support system at the program align with what you want to do after? Is there opportunity for you to do an internship if you want to go to industry or teach? Again, that might align with your research interests. So just some things that you all can be thinking about. If you have any questions about, I guess, any of these categories, feel free to type your question in and we'll, answer the question for you. But for the most part, this is just for you to gauge what you want and need, like what's important to you, and then start narrowing down your schools.
All right. So I think those things also help with kind of creating what is probably one of the hardest documents that you have to create in the application process. So it's called the personal statement or statement of purpose. Some programs will require you to actually write 2 separate documents. So one being a personal statement and the other one being a statement of purpose. However, some programs also combine them into one document themselves. So here, Sierra's graciously provided her personal statement for us to actually look at.
Don't judge my personal statement.
But essentially what it is it's basically a statement or document that is describing, one, who you are, as well as why you want to basically go to graduate school or pursue kind of a doctorate in research. So here we kind of have the text here. We won't read all this to you. However, we want to highlight the main components of it. So the first thing is the intro or the foundation. So with this, you want to basically tell where did your interest come from, or what kind of drove you kind of to have this interest in science or research. And so this can be a range of things, and typically it's probably one of the hardest things to kind of figure out or come up with, maybe.
If you don't know, it can be difficult, but if you know, it's okay.
Yeah. All right. So then this next part is actually briefly outlining your research experience. So basically, this could be your specific research experience or just experiences that you've had where you've integrated science into your education or life in some kind of way. And so here you basically want to talk about basically how that foundation and that interest leads into these experiences that ultimately are driving you into wanting and why you want to go to graduate school. And then the last thing is basically your personal commitment. Basically, why do you want to actually pursue a PhD? Why that program that you're applying to? You want to identify faculties that you're interested in working with in this statement, in this part, basically identifying people that you've gone and researched and said, okay, I think I kind of want to work with this person. And the most important thing, I think also that people tend to maybe not think about as much. I know at the time, I don't think I considered it, but what can I contribute to the program, the lab, and what I can learn from being in this type of place? Because I think that as you are going to this place to learn, you also can contribute as a graduate student. And that's important to actually show like, hey, not only do I want to be here, but I can help improve this place to be something even better.
And just to piggyback off of what Tony is saying, so this third part, I think is probably the most important part of the personal statement. I think a lot of people miss this. So yes, you want to get a PhD clearly because you're applying to this program. So of course you can think of something, but like you want to make sure that you do the research. So when I first did my personal statement, this third section was not in it. It got tore up pretty bad by like 5 different people. And they were like, you need to show you're committed to this institution. They know you're applying to like 7 schools, but you need to show that you're committed to this institution. Not like committed, like I'm definitely coming here, but like why you would be committed if you came here. So like I researched, I think 2 or 3 faculty at the school that I possibly wanted to work with and talked about how my experiences previously integrated with what they did in the lab and what I could learn. And I think a lot of people miss that. You have to highlight what you can contribute because these are people that are bringing you into their lab and they're funding you. So they want to know that you thought about how you can contribute. Right. Of course, you're going to learn things. We all learn things. I'm still learning a lot of stuff and I've been in my lab for a year. But like you definitely want to highlight how you can contribute, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah. So, and feel free to ask any question that you have about this. But I think that this is typically the flow of basically any and all personal statements. The length is something that you also want to check when you're applying to different programs. So this is about a page. However, some programs will ask maybe for a max of 2 pages. Doesn't mean you can't write a page. But the most important thing is that you want to have at least these 3 major components in your statement, because this is what people are going to look at to actually get a sense of kind of who you are.
And if it says max 2, write at least a full page. Do not write a 3/4 page. Do not write a half page. At least write a page. It shows that you put thought into what you said or what you wrote and that you kind of know what you're talking about. Like you're really outlining your journey to how you got from your interest to now. How did this one experience that got you interested in science lead you here? So you should be able to do that in a page. If not, it might show that you're not as committed to the PhD as you might be committed, but on paper. So this is the first thing that they see.
Yeah. And even if you feel like the first time you do this and you can't make it to a page, I think to me that more so says that you haven't thought about it deep enough or well enough. I think like one of the things before we go into that, I want to say like we're some of the unwritten rules that kind of go along with this is along this topic of really like Sierra mentioned, you're basically taking what experiences in your life have kind of led you to wanting to pursue graduate school, a PhD, do this type of research. And if you can't kind of outline that with kind of at least an anecdote, I think you got to think about maybe what is it that's driving you to do this, and then kind of, but not to say that those are things that are going to deter you, but more so things that you just want to identify and then express here. And there are a lot of people, especially us, that can help kind of bring those things out. But it all is about asking.
Yeah. So if you're watching this live link, that means you registered, which means that you have us as a source to edit your material. So if you have any questions, you can ask them on here. But like if you want to email us, tweet us, whatever, we're here to help you. Also, one of the unwritten rules is don't be too personal. I know it's a personal statement, but it's not a sob story. So you want to make sure like you get the point. So this is just for an example, and you guys can go back and read this later, but like I got interested in science because a lot of people in my family had type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. So that's the first time that I really was like, what is this? Mm-hmm. How can I fix it? And that literally was my thought process. So this was like in early high school, and it wasn't until I got into undergrad until I actually liked science. So that's another thing. You don't have to have, I was 7 years old and I just knew my mom bought me a microscope. And that's fine if that's your story, but don't try to fabricate a journey. Your journey is yours, and that's what makes it personal. But you don't have to go into detail about your background growing up unless the prompt tells you to. So like for one of my schools, this was actually called an academic statement of purpose. Okay. And then there was a personal statement. And the personal statement for them was explain any obstacles you've had to overcome to get to where you are. And that's where you can get a little more like into detail about, the obstacles and struggles that you had to go through. But if it's just a plain personal statement, they don't ask you to list any obstacles, you don't necessarily need to go into detail about your past.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, the thing is, it doesn't necessarily, if you want to do clinical research, doesn't mean that you have to have some clinical story that drove you to do that.
That's true.
For me, my personal statement was more so about just my natural curiosity, which was, I feel still is like way broad, and I have no idea how that flew, because I mean, here it's a very concise story. But if that's what drove you to do science and it tells like a cohesive story and concise, then I think you're fine.
Yeah. So really just throw everything on a paper, edit later. Put everything on a paper and then edit it later. Yep. So we're going to go into an activity to kind of help you start taking notes to put into your personal statement.
Yep.
So we're going to give you about 5 minutes to do this activity. These are some questions that you want to start thinking about and integrate them into your personal statement. So where did your passion for research or science come from? When did you get bit by the research bug, which kind of goes into question 1. But science and research aren't the same thing. So my interest in science came, and then my research bug came later. Your long-term career goals. What is it that you want to do post-PhD? How can you bridge your past research experiences, if you have any, with your new research interests? How did your experiences shape your current research and career goals? Why do you want to pursue a PhD in X field? So if you are applying to a genetics and genomics program, why do you want to be in that field? If it's an umbrella program, it's actually a little bit easier, I think. That's my opinion, because you can be more broad in your answer. And then lastly, how does this institution fit into all the questions above and your goals? What faculty will allow you to pursue your research question or answer a question? Yeah. So, Tony, when did you get bit by the research bug?
So I got bit by the research bug my freshman year of college.
Okay.
Yeah. So at Morehouse, I basically worked in a lab. I was interested in medical school, but I was more so interested in neuroscience. Okay. I think at the time I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. But a professor was basically looking for students to come work in his lab. And I sent him an email and was like, hey, can I come? I'm interested in neuroscience. Can I come work in your lab? And I worked there for 4 years.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to what we talked about in session one.
Yep.
You can do these research experiences without going to a program.
Yep.
Find somebody at your school or another school. They might have money at another school, and just the PI itself. And, just reach out. If they say no, they say no. But at least you took your shot.
Exactly. So, Sierra, I had a question for you.
Oh.
How did your experiences shape your current career goals or research interests?
Okay, it's a long story, but I'll make it short. Okay, so when I started, I actually wanted to go to pharmacy school. I did not know what a PhD was. I didn't know research was a career.
Pharmacy school is like PharmD.
Yes.
Okay.
But all I knew, I interact with pharmacists as a regular person. Your doctor and a pharmacist and a dentist. Those are the people in science I interacted with. So I was like, okay, I want to make medicine. I can do that as a pharmacist. Mm-hmm. I cannot do that as a pharmacist really. So I was like, I did a research experience in freshman year. Mm-hmm. Actually hated my research experience. It was computational, and I don't like computational. But I took a class, and we learned how to write a protocol. We just had to come up with a protocol for this question. And the professor was like, what are you doing when you leave school? And I was like, well, I'm going to pharmacy school. And he was like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, make medicine. And he was like, no, you're going to go to graduate school. So I actually started working in his lab. He actually made me come work in his lab. Nice. So I didn't ask. He was like, you come work in my lab this year. So I did my first clinical experience. So we worked with human saliva samples. And then he was like, okay, after this summer or after this year, you need to go to Duke for a summer. So he made me go to Duke for a summer. And I was in a genetics lab. Oh. I was a chemistry major. Biology wasn't my thing. Didn't know what I was doing in the lab. But I actually worked in a lab that actually was working on a cure for a disease. And that kind of was like, okay, I'm going to graduate school because that's what I want to do. I want to make medicine for type 2 diabetes. So that was my baseline. Yeah. So that kind of shaped why I went to go to graduate school. And I got re-interested in biology because I didn't like biology in high school. I loved chemistry. I was like the chemistry girl. But that kind of shaped my research interest. Career goals are still up in the air. So we'll see.
So I think that it's interesting because, one, it's a nice story.
Thanks. I tried to make it breathe.
But I think what's really interesting about that is the other question up here is how can you bridge your past research experiences with your new research interests? And I think that I definitely did a few summer programs. And even if the point that I'm trying to make is even if you don't like your summer research experience or working in that lab, you still can talk about that experience because one, it's an experience that you had, but more so how that shaped your interest is you realized you didn't like it. And I think that that's something that you can definitely learn about and you can talk about in your personal statement.
I actually love working at genetics lab though. I didn't think I would like it because I had to learn genetics to actually do my project. I also did troubleshooting for PCR for like 6 of those 10 weeks. So that was a pain.
That's a true story.
But I learned genetics by having to troubleshoot PCR to figure out what exactly PCR was. Yeah. And figure out why this might not be working. Ended up being primary
in the summer.
But in a summer. So like not an extended period of time. So I really enjoyed that. I had a good mentor. He was MD, PhD. So I actually got to go to clinic with him too. So
nice.
I do want to do translational stuff. And I think because I've been exposed to the clinical side, even in my post-bac, we did clinical stuff. I've like mainly did clinical stuff. Been able to do that at the bench and connect it to the clinic.
Nice.
I like that a lot. So
yeah. Cool. So these are kind of really just prompts that help you build those things that you need to be putting into your personal statement in that format. So I think if you basically take time, answer these questions, develop them into paragraphs, and then eventually merge them together, it should more or less come to like a really nice personal statement.
Even if it's like 4 pages at first, you can figure out how to chop it down later. Just, answer the questions and then see how you can cut.
Yep. It's always easier to cut.
Amen.
So the other part, another very huge part of your your graduate school application is really communicating your experiences more in the format of what admissions committee will want to look at. And so you could do this typically through what is more popularly known as a resume. But in science and research, we also have this other term called a curriculum vitae or a CV. And then when you begin to apply for funding through the National Institutes of Health, which is probably one of the major funding sources of a lot of research in the biomedical sciences, you actually will have to create an NIH BioSketch.
They're all connected, and we'll talk about how they're connected a little bit.
Yep. So with the resume, essentially you have 1 to 2 pages. This is probably something that I think most people are most familiar with. I think I was familiar with the resume coming out of high school. So it's like 1 to 2 pages, and it's more of a very specific document for whatever it is that you're submitting or using it for. So in it, you want to list the objectives, goals, interests that you have, as well as any relevant experiences to the position. So it shouldn't really go over 2 pages. I think it's actually frowned upon probably to be more than like 1 page, but I don't know if that's necessarily true.
I don't know. I haven't used a resume.
Yeah.
I used a resume like a month ago because I was applying to an internship. I had to figure out how to create one from the CV, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really kind of catered to. So I have 2 resumes now. So I have one that I use if I'm looking for an internship. So it has my research on there. But then I have one if I wanted to do something. So I do a lot of outreach and diverse. Me and Tony and our cameraman does a lot. We do a lot of like diversity outreach. So I have a separate resume for that. If I was applying to something that was geared towards diversity and outreach,
Right.
I have a separate one that doesn't list my research experiences.
But it's still keeping it to like 2
1
pages.
to 2 pages.
Yeah. So the other one is the CV, which you're more familiar with as you begin to put together your applications. So the CV basically has no page limits. It's basically going to be a document that lists the history of almost every experience that you have. Someone gave me the advice to just keep filling it up. And when time gets near, you start to kind of just take things off. But these range from probably 2 pages starting out to a couple pages long for like the most tenured professor. So don't think, okay, my CV is not, a certain length. I haven't done much. That's totally not true. However, the whole point of this is really that you outline your experiences. So basically on this, you also have your research and career interests, as well as the experiences, skills, service that you have. And we're going to go into detail about these documents and all that. And the third one is the NIH BioSketch. So this is roughly still about 2 pages. It's also going to probably mimic more of the resume, but it's in a very specific style for the National Institutes of Health, in that what they really want is your personal statement, your relevant experience to the position, as well as typically the grant that you're applying to. So you want to, I think they call it your key contributions. So basically how you contribute to the project, but also the field of science. And then for most fellowships for, I believe, graduate students or just students at any level, you typically have to upload all of your grades.
Definitely undergrad and grad. I think once you leave grad school, the grades option falls off. Like you don't need to, once you graduate and get your PhD, you don't have to list your courses that you took in graduate school and your grades, unless they specify it.
Yeah, and there's a template for the NIH BioSketch on their website. Yeah. So basically you can download the template and then basically populate whatever information that you want or that you need to put in there.
And you can actually start building your NIH BioSketch now. And if you want it, like if you have a CV, you can definitely convert it into a BioSketch just to be prepared.
Yep.
I think most of us don't start until we actually need it.
Yeah. Definitely not
like me. But actually, I started like 2 years ago. I just like put my info in, then I had to go back and actually do it.
That's good.
But the personal statement on here too is actually shorter. It's not that 1 page, right? It's like a paragraph or 2.
Yeah.
It's not your full personal statement, but we'll definitely send you examples. This is actually Tony's BioSketch up here, but we'll send you our examples of a BioSketch in case you are interested in starting to work on a BioSketch.
All right. So today we're really going to focus on, however, the resume as well as the CV.
So most of you probably already have a resume. Probably when you're in high school, if you worked in high school, you probably got a resume because you applied to a job. But if not, that's fine. You can still build your resume now, and we're going to talk to you about converting to a CV. So just in detail, you definitely have your contact information at the top of your resume. With the CV and the resume, some places or some people also want a picture. So when I went to Abercrombs, when I was applying for the third time. I actually had my picture on my CV so that when my name came across their desk, you met me at Abercrombie, but they could place my face. If they didn't remember my name, they could place my face to my application. Unwritten rule, but if you go to a conference, I will leave it on there. If you don't, you don't necessarily have to, but you can. So definitely your education. You want to limit your education here to the degrees that you were awarded. So my CV education looked a little bit different because I had some experiences at another institution, but it wasn't a degree granting program. So I did not list it on my resume. Mm-hmm. I have my objective/interest here. Really, this is just my research interest. This resume was geared towards a research position in industry. So I kept it as interest instead of objective. But you could also put like my objective is to get an entry-level intern position at XYZ. Yep. Or you can just list what your interests are. I also have my experiences here. I think I have like 3 or 4 here, but they were only the ones that were relevant to the position and most recent. So I didn't put all of my undergraduate research experience. I didn't put that I worked at a cupcake shop when I was in high school. Like none of that other work experience that wasn't relevant.
At a cupcake shop.
Oh yeah, it's called Sweeties and it's so good. Sorry, digress. But I didn't list any of my past experiences. Yep. I could have listed that I worked as a pharmacy technician in undergrad if I was applying to a pharmaceutical company. That might be relevant. I have some background on how the pharmacy systems work. So just think about what experiences you have, research or not, that actually are relevant to the position. And then this is my page 2, again, outlining more of my research experience. And then I also have my publications. So last week we talked about how publications is kind of your currency in science. Yep. So if you have publications, list them on your resume. You don't have to list them all. Just list the ones that either you're most proud of or that's most recent. These are all of my publications, which there's not much yet, but so I was able to fit all my publications here. But if you don't have publications, just stick to the one page. That's fine. Mm-hmm. Anybody have questions about a resume? If you already have a resume, anything, just let us know. We're going to go into, actually, before we do that. So this yellow circle at the top. Oh, yeah. So it is very important, even though everything is going electronic these days, to put a header and page number at the top of your documents. I don't care what kind of document. I don't care if it's your personal statement, your CV, your resume, your research statement. Any document that you're submitting, have your name on it. Let's say somebody decides to print out all your documents so they can read it because they like paper, because I like paper, I print. And all your papers fall on the floor. They're able to identify which papers are yours and which order they go in. It's not really a necessary thing, but it's kind of one of those unwritten things. It's best to have a header so they can identify which document belong to which student or employee. Applicant. Oh, applicant is a very good word. Tony is so smart, y'all. No. Okay, so we're going to talk about how you take your 1 to 2 page resume and convert it into this multi-page document called a curriculum vitae, or a CV for short. So you got your 2 pages. So again, I have my name on here. You probably can't see too well, but you guys, when you get the document, you can see I have my LinkedIn profile link at the top. If somebody's viewing this in a browser, they can click on that and they can go to my LinkedIn, which is a virtual CV, which I probably need to update. But some people like LinkedIn and they might want to see who your networks are. People use social media to judge you as a person, even your LinkedIn. I know some professors that will search you on LinkedIn to see who your connections are, what type of stuff you're posting on LinkedIn, what you're sharing, what you're liking. So be mindful of that. If you want to share your LinkedIn, you can. You don't have to. If you don't have one, you can probably you don't have to have one now, but you'll eventually need to get one because everything is social media. I don't have one yet. Tony needs a LinkedIn, and I've been telling him that. But LinkedIn, if you use it right, you can use it for jobs. So like you can apply for a job on LinkedIn. People can find you on LinkedIn. You can put your actual resume on LinkedIn and people can view it and say, hey, we want to interview you for this job because we saw your resume on LinkedIn. You can also look at like job positions, but that's a whole different story for another day. But also I have my email, my phone number, and my location. So I have my city and state. You don't have to put your address on there. I've seen some people do that, but it's not necessary. I have all of my relevant education. So I have my bachelor's degree. Currently, I'm a doctorate student. Then I have my post-bac experience because I did take courses and I did have a research experience there. It just wasn't degree granting. But for your CV, you're listing your whole track record. My objective and interests, my research experiences, and then for each research experience, I have my position. So I'm currently a graduate student research assistant. I have who I worked with, my mentor, the title of my thesis project or research project, if you don't have a thesis yet, what I did and what skills I learned. You can make skills a separate section, but this is my format. This is not universal. This is just the format that I use. Also, I have my publications listed again. So manuscripts and abstracts. So if you go to a conference and it's submitted, that's a publication. It's a it's an abstract publication. Also, my presentation, so both oral presentation and poster presentations, whether I did it at a conference, whether I did it at an institution, I have them all listed. I have an invited talk on here that I did, which is a separate section that hopefully will grow. I have a section for teaching and mentorship. So these things usually are not on your CV or your resume unless you're applying for a teaching job. So I listed all of my teaching and mentoring experiences, the diversity, equity, and inclusion in science work that I do or science outreach. And then on my 5th page, it's getting it's very lengthy at this point, but my institutional service. So I've served as a student host. I do recruitment events. So anything that I've done on behalf of the university, I have this in a separate section. Any honors and awards I've gotten since undergrad. So because I'm only a graduate student, I still include my undergraduate work. But maybe in 20 years, that stuff will fall off. Kind of like in 7 years, stuff fall off your credit report, something like that. My research support. So when I was doing these experiences, who was actually supporting me when I was doing the research, and any research support I have for myself, any grants or fellowships. Professional societies. Since most of you are in undergrad, you can also list any honor societies that you're in or student organizations and what your contribution was there. And then community service. None of these are like set in stone. You can put what you want to on there, but the idea is that you're putting everything on your CV. I will send you a template. So me and Tony use tables to do ours. So like if I was applying for a STEM education job, I will move my mentoring and my teaching closer to the front. It's in the back now. Because it's more relevant, you read it in order. And then also reverse chronological order. So what's most recent to what's less recent. So you go in reverse chronological or order. So that's kind of what a CV is. It's lengthy, it's long. It's not complicated. It's just lengthy. And the best way to keep up with all the things that you do is take inventory of yourself. Pick a day of the month. I pick the last day of the month.
That's good.
And if I've done anything in that month, I'll put it in my CV. Otherwise, I'm going to forget. And if you forget, you forget.
Yeah, I think it's also easier to basically use the CV as a place to extract things for your resume. And I mean, if you have this, like, I have like a document that literally is work in progress, and that's like my everything. And then
your CV?
So it's titled work in progress, but it's essentially my CV. And then what I end up doing is whenever I need to like update it or send it off, I'll date it and basically save it as a CV with that date, usually the month and the year. And then I'll have my headers. So like my header or footer will have like the date and the year and my name. But essentially, you can refer back to this one work in progress document and then have your CV. So it's easier to update. The only issue is I have not updated my CV in some time now.
Tell them how long you haven't updated your CV.
It's probably been about a year now.
That's okay. Don't feel bad.
Oh,
have you had to submit it anywhere? Besides the most recent thing, have you had to submit your CV anywhere?
So yes, my program asks for updated CV.
Well, learn from Tony's mistake and stay updated on your CV so you don't have to rush and do it at the end. But so it's not complicated, but it's definitely something. It's the preferred communication of your experiences when you're applying. Some may say resume or CV, but 10 times out of 10, they want you to submit a CV and not a resume or a bio sketch. Right. None of those, a CV.
And the hassles, like I said, the first time. After that, it's pretty easy. Just keep updating this thing.
Yeah. But we're going to make it easy for y'all because we're going to give you a template. You can just plug stuff into the table. If you want to use this format, you can redo the format, but we'll give you a template to start to build your CV if you haven't started building a CV. And then if you have questions about what you should or should not include on your CV, if like you really don't know, you can always ask us and we'll tell you whether or not you should put it on there.
Yep. So the other beauty part of the CV or creating the CV or your resume and having these experiences listed is that it's easy then to kind of pick it apart and highlight certain experiences that are probably most meaningful. Mm-hmm. And so this is done in the form of a research statement. All right. And so the research statement is essentially another document that is that called prose, where it's kind of just like a free write?
Tony, okay, English was not my strongest. I'm a math and science girl.
Okay, but the main thing is you're writing about your experiences in kind of more of this story narrative. Narrative is probably a better word to use. So essentially what you're doing is outlining I say probably 3 most impactful research experiences that you have. And so this could be anywhere from sometimes your longest research experience, but maybe it's not the long research experience, but more so the short summer research experience that you realize, oh, wow, there's some aspect of what it was that you really like.
But if you have a long-term experience, include it. And I will say this because I got some feedback on my first year applying. I had done a lot of like summer or like short-term research projects. And one of the feedback I got from one of the institutions I applied to that I didn't get an interview for was, you've only worked like 3 months at a time on a project. We want to see that you've stuck with something long-term. If you haven't, please do not be discouraged. But this is just something to consider, like having long-term experience. So just like joining a faculty lab, again, doesn't have to be a program. If you work with a faculty over a year for an academic year, like it shows that you're committed to a project. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have data or a publication, but like it shows that, oh, this person was committed. They worked in this lab from August to April or May, and wow, they really want to be in science because they committed all this time to working in this lab.
Yeah, and I mean, from the admissions standpoint, I never sat on admissions, but as I understand it, the whole purpose of the statement is to show that, one, you've got an experience and that you're going to be able to do research in graduate school. Mm-hmm. And so typically, I think one of the questions is always, do I go for the length or the breadth of the actual research experience and talk about that? And so that's why we actually chose the word most impactful, because the one that is kind of helping you tell the story is the most important thing. The things that you want to incorporate or make sure that you list for each of these experiences are, when did you do them? Where did you do them? And with who? Typically, this is a professor, the faculty member, or you can also mention the graduate student or postdoc that you're working with. The other thing that you have to also listen is your contribution. So what did you do? Mm-hmm. Don't necessarily say I guess you could say the actual technique, but not list everything that you did in that lab, like making solutions and X, Y, and Z. I think really what we want to know is what was your physical contribution, but also your more
intellectual contribution.
Yeah. And what did you gain from that? What did you do? Were you engaged during that experience? And then the last thing is, what did you gain? So what skills did you learn? Are you going to present that at a conference? Did you present that at a conference? Did you get a publication? So typically you kind of have like your summer research experience, but at the end you may kind of do a research symposium. Mm-hmm. You can talk about that. Or you can say we submitted to ABRCAMS or SACNAS. That's something. Or if it's getting written up, which is also really great. I mean, You can even say that. So basically having some synopsis so that the person or the reader gets a picture of, okay, I see this person was engaged in research.
Mm-hmm.
They learned something and they can then kind of put themselves in another predicament where they're learning more and getting more experience. And the last thing is basically something that, depending on the length, you can either expand or I think that's really important to contribute is how this connects to you as a person,
Mm-hmm.
but also how this shapes your passion for research. So this includes basically talking about how whatever experiences you had led to the interest you're bitten by the research bug, what it is that you gained. So I learned that I definitely want to do translational research
Mm-hmm.
versus basic research. I wanted to work with animal models versus humans, like these types of things, but more in a concise, again, very concise, depending on the word length that you have. But the whole point that I also want to kind of put in there is that I think typically better research statements um, marry the personal statement. So you can basically read the research statement, the personal statement, get a sense of kind of who the person is based on the experiences that they had.
Yeah, they should definitely connect.
So we'll revisit once again this application checklist. And today we talked about a list of things. So one, selecting the program of interest, how to go about thinking about those things. The next one is a statement of purpose, personal statement, which we talked about the differences in between. Both of those are basically getting at your personal journey and why grad school. The research statement, which is basically what research you've done, your experiences and what have come from that, as well as your CV. And so one of the things that we did not talk about, however, I think you probably want to start if you're in the application phase now, is definitely start thinking about and asking your letter recommendation writers, as well as look into whether or not you need to get your official transcripts or not. And then the GRE, which is another barrier that you may or may not, whatever you choose to do, take.
And again, that link to the programs that no longer require the GRE. So the last email that I sent yesterday, there's an additional resources section. There's a link there to the schools that no longer require the GRE. And I will say for letters of recommendation, most people want your CV or your personal statement so that they can write a strong letter. Yep. So when I ask for letters of recommendation, they're like, okay, can you send me your CV?
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like you want to have at least a draft of your personal statement and CV ready.
At least CV.
For your letter recommendation writer.
Yep.
All right. So a few unwritten rules that we kind of wanted to go through. So the first one, stick to the script. If you get a prompt basically for your personal statement or statement of purpose, stick to what they ask for and give it a page. Don't go over if they ask for only a page. And as Sierra stated earlier, if they ask for 2 pages, give at least a page and a quarter.
At least a page.
Yeah. So include prospective faculty. That's a pro tip that I think you mentioned last week. But
yes, that shows that you did your research on the institution. A lot of people don't do this. I don't know a lot of grads that did this. And also, you can contact those prospective faculty that you mentioned in your application before you submit. So they're like, oh, this person mentioned me and they contacted me. This person must really want to be in my lab. Look, you already got a good foot in already.
And if you go to conferences and you see them, definitely walk up and say, hey, I'm interested in your research. Yeah. That's probably, be careful how you do that. But I think that's a way that a lot of people kind of do it at conferences. That's
and we can talk about etiquette in our last session when we talk about transition for sure.
So always ask about fee waivers. So if you go to conferences, as well as if you're just looking at websites, they may not necessarily list exactly how to go about fee waivers, but usually in the application page where they're discussing the application, they have someone you can contact and just ask. It's a simple email. Do you all offer fee waivers for your application? Also look and see if they require your official or unofficial transcripts.
Right.
If it's not clear, that's another question to ask and get in contact with the admins that are involved in the application process.
Also, if they require you to send your transcript and you have to pay for it, and if it's a financial burden, it's okay to ask if there's a way that you can, if there's a way to bypass that, or if there's some kind of assistance that they can provide. You never know until you ask. If they say no, they say no. But some places might actually be like, okay, well, if this is a financial strain, for one, you probably will automatically apply for a fee waiver. And not trying to be funny, but low socioeconomic status is usually a requirement for a fee waiver. And they might just be okay with you submitting an unofficial transcript as long as it has the letterhead of the institution.
Right. But some programs also just ask for unofficial, which it could be a PDF. So, but these are some things that you definitely have to look up and make sure based on the school that you do.
Right.
So only ask for strong letters of from your recommenders, so your mentors and professors. If your professor is going to write, I think you talked about a paragraph or not really talk about your experiences in the lab, in their class, then you may not want to ask them. I think it's probably, I would err on getting letters from people who've seen you in lab settings, in research settings, over typically just class. However, you could have a combination of both. But if you worked in the research lab, you should, and you talk about that in your research statement, make sure you have a letter from that lab.
Yes, if you put 3, so I know we talked about 3 experiences, and you might have 1, and that's fine. You need to expand on that in your research statement. But at least 1 letter needs to come from somebody that you did research with. Mm-hmm. And if you list 3, all 3 letters probably should be somebody that you did research with. Yeah. Learn from me and ask the right people. It's not that I asked the wrong person. I worked with his grad student, not him. Yeah. He saw me in lab, but just make sure that they can write a strong letter, someone that actually worked with you.
Yep. All right. And have at least 3 people read, review, edit, mark up, do whatever they need to do.
Trash it.
Yeah. Your application materials. I think during the time of applying to graduate school, I probably have like 4 or 5 different versions of a personal statement with 4 or 5 different stories. Yeah, I had a lot of different experiences with science that I thought were...
Mine was the same one, just got solved by like 5 different people. Yeah. And then so your first draft should be marked up.
Yeah.
If it's not marked up, you need to have some other people read your personal statement. Seriously.
Yep. And every time I give it to someone else, they found something new. So,
and that's okay.
Yeah. It takes probably 3 to 6 months though. 2 months maybe.
To do what?
Write a personal statement, a great one. It took me a long time. I was not even in school.
Sorry, Tony. I'm not a good example, y'all, because I did not start in those 6 months before.
Okay, maybe not 6 months.
But that's good. No, be like Tony. Do not write it 2 weeks before deadline.
Long.
That's good though. I probably would have gone to grad school the first time I probably did what Tony did. I should have started at 6 months. Like Tony. But I got in. Now. I'm here now.
Start now is really what
yes, definitely start now. We're here to help you. We're 1 people, so outside of us, 2 more people need to edit and review at least.
Yep. Stay organized.
Yes. So I am super type A, and I like organization. So we are going to show you how we kind of stayed organized because Tony had a similar.
Yeah.
This is an Excel sheet that we will share with you. But if you're applying to more than 1 school, I think that you need to be keeping account of everything that you wrote for each school. Mm-hmm. So like you see the columns here, but like I think the needs and wants that we talked about in the first activity, you can also list a column for them. Definitely identify your letter of recommendation. When you completed your application, you can highlight it. You can put a check mark in the box. I definitely wanted to highlight these 4 columns. So a fee waiver. I prioritize my institutions and this is me, that I apply to based off of whether or not I have to pay for the application. I apply to 8 schools, I only pay for 1. So I use that as a priority for me. So you can prioritize how you want. Also, I had a list for whether or not I sent my official transcripts and if I sent my GRE scores. Now this column can be something different. You can put yes or no in the GRE score column if that's a yes or no, whether or not they require them. Or you can put if you sent them, if you want to send them. And then lastly, contact. On the website or when you make your account for an institution, there's a contact email for if you have any questions. Put that information in your Excel sheet. So if you have any questions, you know who to contact and you're not scrambling at the end.
Oh, man. That's, yeah. Because going back to the website and like looking and like, oh, man.
Websites change sometimes. So if you get the contact information, put it in there.
So you'll get an Excel file of this, right?
Yeah, we'll send this to you. Okay. And then lastly, we definitely just want to reiterate the application process. We are still in September. You still have time to put your materials together. Don't feel like you don't have time.
You don't need 6 months.
You don't, but you also need more than 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So, if you have any questions, there's so many ways to contact us. We have an email. If you follow us on Twitter, you can DM us, mention us, or you can use the hashtag HBCU-DAP, and we can have a Twitter chat with everybody on Twitter. Also, we have a website. It is not launched yet, but if you go to HBCU-DAP.com, you can sign up and subscribe so that when we do fully launch, you'll be notified, and all these resources will be in one place for you. So all the resources, the mentorship and support will be a one-stop shop for you on HBCU-DAP.com.